No, I wouldn't have wanted that, not a second strike. The first strike was very lethal. It was fine, and if there were two people around, but Pete said that didn't happen.
To clarify, Admiral Bradley was the one who gave that order for a second strike.
And he was well within his authority to do so.
The White House is lying, but that's no surprise.
Is he seeking regime change for Maduro? Will he put U.S. troops in harm's way? Nobody knows.
A lot of accusations flying back and forth over an acknowledged second strike on an alleged Venezuelan drug boat. Let's bring in our panel. Josh Kraushaar is a Fox News Radio political analyst, Matthew Continetti scholar at the American Enterprise Institute, and Wall Street Journal opinion columnist, and Axios political reporter Steph Kite. So they acknowledged today that there was a second strike on this boat from back in the beginning of September. Here's what Karoline Leavitt said about it. Listen here.
With respect to the strikes in question on September 2nd, Secretary Hegseth authorized Admiral Bradley to conduct these kinetic strikes. Admiral Bradley worked well within his authority and the law, directing the engagement to ensure the boat was destroyed and the threat to the United States of America was eliminated.
So, Steph, she was very careful to say that the boat was destroyed because critics have said, no, this was to kill the survivors.
Right, and that's one of the questions that Congress is hoping to get an answer to. What was the purpose of the second strike? Were there additional survivors who were killed in the strike, as was reported? And this is something that we heard even from Armed Service Chair Senator Rogers today, who said he's going to be trying to get to the bottom of this, that he has spoken with Secretary Hegseth, that they want to figure out what the facts actually are. Of course, Democrats are making a big issue of this, saying that war crimes might have been committed because of the way this went down. Republicans are, taking a step back for now. Most of them are just saying we want to figure out what the facts actually are. A few, like Senator Rand Paul, have been quite critical of the U.S.'s approach to Venezuela, these strikes overall. But there are a lot of major questions. I think it is very important that the White House did acknowledge that this second strike happened and that there was, a call for that to happen, a second strike to take place, whether or not it was directly coming out of Hegseth's mouth or not.
Yeah, so the White House is basically saying, Matt, that Hegseth gave the ball to Admiral Frank Bradley and said, you do with this what you need to do, and that the call was made by Bradley. And some people are already saying, oh, Bradley's going to be a sacrificial lamb here.
This is the type of story that I think really obsesses the Beltway. You have leaks to the Washington Post. You have the White House issuing very carefully calibrated statements. You have people accusing the White House and Secretary Hegseth of passing the buck. But I think, John, the larger story here, beyond the Beltway, is that Americans look and they see the president taking action against these narco traffickers, actually putting the truth to the phrase war on drugs. And among Republican voters in particular, they're not interested in the minutia. They're more interested in the bold strikes and in combating the drug dealers.
Do you think the White House explanation calms things down or just fuels the fire?
Well, look, I thought it was notable that there were some mixed messages initially when Trump was talking Sunday, somewhat distancing himself from the second strike before Karoline Leavitt at the briefing seemed to put everyone on the same page. But Pete Hegseth was not running away from his decision-making. The White House now is embracing that second strike and saying it's within legal grounds. But I think the bigger issue here is the Republican Party. And Steph was saying that they're not criticizing the decision per se, but there are the leading senator on the Armed Services Committee, Roger Wicker, conservative from Mississippi. You also have the leading House member, Mike Rogers, on the House Armed Services Committee, raising very serious concerns and calling for oversight. So there's going to be a lot more questions. There's going to be a lot more fact gathering. But Republicans are not entirely comfortable about the decision-making process, and I don't think they're settled after Leavitt's comments today.
So there's calls for some oversight, but Senator Mark Kelly says there needs to be an outright investigation. Listen to what he said.
There needs to be an investigation. We need to pull some of these members of DOD and the military into the armed services committees in the House and the Senate. I will say, though, as somebody who has sunk two ships myself, that folks in the military need to understand, the law of the sea, the Geneva Conventions. If there were, in fact, as reported, survivors clinging to a damaged vessel, that could be, over a line. I hope it's not the case.
If you look into the law of war, if there is a vessel that is damaged but still functional or could be repaired or whatever, within those parameters, you should be allowed to go after the vessel and make sure that it's sunk. I mean, how many times did that happen during various wars. But if the vessel was out of commission, there were survivors clinging to the side, that's a different matter.
It is, and that detail will matter to Republicans especially, and I think that's why Republicans right now are holding back. But these are serious allegations, and I think it is something. This is an issue that Republicans have already been uneasy with the way the White House has moved forward in such an aggressive way without getting approval from Congress ahead of time. So depending on what we find out, whether it's through a formal investigation or just back and forth between these committee leaders and the Defense Department and the White House, I think we could start to see more Republicans push back on the way the White House has been operating in Venezuela.
So we have seen the initial strike. That was one of the first videos that was out, but we did not see video of in the interstitial between the first and the second strike. Would it behoove the War Department to release that?
Sure. I mean, I think Congress is going to ask for it anyway. I think what we're seeing here, though, John, is a preview of what happens when Democrats control Congress in 2027 if they win in the midterm elections. Republicans are going to protect the White House even as they increase the scrutiny bit by bit. But with Democrats in charge and the Speaker's gavel, you would have wide-ranging investigations and subpoenas and potential charges.
So big consequences for next November, depending on how it goes.
Big consequences, and I think big picture is that Trump would be well served by speaking to the American public. I think there's a lot of lack of understanding among voters, and what is the goal? Is there a larger strategic vision in terms of taking out all these drug boats? Is there a strategic play in Venezuela, which has become become an emerging issue in the weeks ahead as our military ramps up right outside the coast of Venezuela? So I think there is a possible political big debate coming, and it's one thing that Trump should be advised to get ahead of.
No, I mean, the overall goal would seem to be to return democracy to Venezuela and to remove China's influence, as well as Iran and other nefarious players in that area, and try to make it a place where the United States can do business. We're already talking about what oil companies would do if they got access to Venezuela.
I mean, I think that's certainly what the Trump White House would argue is their goal, and something that many Republicans would likely back them for. But you get into this situation again where Congress has a role. Once we're starting to build a military presence, we're talking about potential strikes on land in Venezuela. This gets into war powers resolution territory where Congress wants to be able to use their power and have say.
Matt, just 25 seconds left. There's a lot of firepower in the Caribbean, and at some point, you got that much firepower, you might just use it.
There's a lot of firepower. There's a bounty on Maduro's head. There is CIA operations happening inside the country, and now there's an ultimatum. I think we're getting close to decision time for the White House.
Yeah, it's beginning to look a lot like December 1990, isn't it? All right. Thank you. Stand